I want to try out a particular strategy here. In previous videos where I had been drafting from later on in the first round, I had been taking running backs early because we've seen a lot of wide receivers go off the board in the middle of the first, early in the first. You see Chase and Lamb go here. I don't know exactly what the order is going to be by the time things really roll around toward draft season, but I think you can expect to see a lot of wide receivers go early in the first round. So to do like a pretty robust wide receiver build like I normally prefer to do, I'm going to have to pick an earlier draft position, and I'm going to eventually mock from all 12 spots in 12-team leagues, and I'll do it for full PPR and half PPR over the next month plus. But for this, I wanted to go a little bit early and pick one of these receivers to lead off with. Problem is, I think I might even prefer to do it from around the 6 or the 7 because I don't have a lot of preferences. I like all of these wide receivers that are going at this point in the first round. I'm going to have to pick one, though, and why not just go with Justin Jefferson? People kind of worried about his quarterback situation, understandably so, but I think the talent is as good as any wide receiver in the league. So let's just go ahead and see what our team ends up looking like with him as our selection. Could have gone Amon-Ra St. Brown, could have gone Tyreek Hill. Can't really go wrong with any of those 5, in my opinion. The margins are so slim. And here I feel pretty glad that I didn't take Amon-Ra because at this point I think I'm going to tend to lean toward the tight end Sam Laporta, going one pick behind Travis Kelce, who was the first tight end taken. Running backs in this range, I do like Achane. I think it's a slight bit early to go Derrick Henry, but he's probably not getting back to me, so he would definitely be a consideration here. According to ADP, he's going to be gone by my third-round pick, but I'm going to take Sam Laporta anyway, unless I go wide receiver again. Let's kind of take a look in this range. Typically, historically, I really do like to load up on these top-end wide receivers. I just continue to find this year, though, that there are so many names down the board that I consider to be better values. So I won't double up on wide receiver like Team 6 did with Amon-Ra and Drake London. I'm going to shy away from Achane, even though I think he would be a really good pick here. But let's go ahead and do another draft here where we draft Sam Laporta. This will be the second video in a row in which I've done this, and I'm kind of curious to see how it plays out. We see Achane and Pacheco go off the board, then Josh Jacobs. Derrick Henry does fall to us, and Travis Etienne is sitting there as well. That's not really a decision that I thought I was going to end up facing. I like both these running backs, so I'm going to end up taking one or the other. Nico Collins and Ayuk, the only wide receivers to go off the board since my last pick, so that board is not all too different than what we faced in the second round. Josh Allen does go off the board as the quarterback, the first one to be taken. I could probably consider Josh Allen at this spot in the third round if he were still around, but I don't think you're typically going to see that. I don't know. It's kind of dealer's choice between Etienne and Derrick Henry. I really do think that Derrick Henry is going to score a lot of touchdowns with Baltimore, and I really like his fit there. But I think ADP-wise, it might just be fine to take Travis Etienne, and he's not somebody I've taken in any mock drafts yet, so let's go ahead and take our shot. There are rumors and rumblings that Jacksonville would prefer maybe to see Travis Etienne on a little bit of a lighter workload this year, and that could end up being the case, but I think for right now, he's still a pretty nice pick at the 3.4. That should be a good offense there in Jacksonville. So I like being able to basically grab a pretty good running back, obviously a darn good wide receiver, and maybe the top tight end if we see things break the way of Sam Laporta in 2024. So feeling pretty good about where we start. Let's scroll down a little bit, give you guys a look at the draft board as it's locking up here. Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson are the quarterbacks off the board since our last pick. This might be a draft where we wait at the QB position because I would like to kind of demonstrate just how much value that I believe could be there at that position. We're looking wide receiver. I took DK Metcalf in the last mock that I did, and I really like the way that he fits on any of these teams as a wide receiver 2, or if you really go heavy at the position, a wide receiver 3. He could very well be the one for Seattle this year, and they're talking like they're going to move him around a lot and be creative with him. But maybe a year 2 breakout for Zay Flowers. He was good last year, and I think that Baltimore offense is going to be really strong. I take Zay Flowers. I think slightly lean him over Devontae Smith due to the fact that I think Flowers could be the one in Baltimore. Smith is obviously going to have to contend with A.J. Brown for targets. In a real draft, I probably take Metcalf over Flowers. I think that's what my rankings would indicate. But since I just did one yesterday with Metcalf, I kind of want to mix it up a little bit and see how I feel. Two purple wide receivers, two receivers on purple NFL teams makes it fun. Mark Andrews goes. We weren't considering him anyway because we've already got our tight end locked up, so we have no problem with that. Can't draft C.J. Stroud, but we were going to wait on quarterback anyway. I do think Anthony Richardson is a nice value at this stage of the draft, but I want to kind of stick to my premise of going with a little bit of a later pick at the quarterback position in this draft. I continue to try to fall into different patterns as I do this to kind of see how I feel about things, but I just don't love the running backs in this range. So maybe it ends up being a wide receiver that I take here. George Pickens could be interesting as a wide receiver 3 because he's the number 1 in Pittsburgh. But do you trust the quarterback play of those guys in Pittsburgh? I'll have to, again, I'm not committing to being heavy on George Pickens when the time comes, but just kind of taking a look at ADP and recognizing that he's a decent value there. Could I have gone Rome Odunze as I did in my last mock? Sure. Could I have considered Keenan Allen? He could be a great target hog in PPR formats. Got to remember the format for sure. And Pickens more of a home run hitter, whereas Allen probably going to be a guy that gets you double-digit targets. But, I mean, Pickens could have a good connection with whoever starts for the Steelers, and then suddenly you're thinking he was a great value. I don't love George Pickens. I don't love his whole aura. I think he's a little bit of a selfish player, but that doesn't really have to matter for fantasy. If his NFL team in the locker room likes him, I'm worried that Pickens could go the way of like a Chase Claypool and the way that Claypool is now viewed across the league. But Pickens has real talent, so I'm not completely out on him at the draft price. We'll just have to wait and see. That could end up being a very nice value. All right, we already have a tight end. We're not drafting a quarterback just yet, we don't think. And, yeah, the values suggest that we probably should continue waiting. I don't like the running backs, man. It's such a big dead zone for me at the running back position. I could take a shot on Rashee Rice. I'd probably go Rice with this pick if not for the looming suspension that I'm anticipating. And, shoot, we might even get him at this spot now. And as a player on our bench, Rashee Rice, I think, fits really well this year just because, you know, you might miss him for the first handful of weeks, but he ended up being a go-to guy for Mahomes last season. What do you bake in, though, with all the changes? Hollywood Brown is there now. Xavier Worthy had been drafted. That's sort of something you have to make peace with. Jordan Addison would have been a nice pick at 6.9 had I not already taken Justin Jefferson earlier in this draft. So that was sort of my explanation for that. Give you a look at what the running back board looks like here. I know I've only got one. I don't intend to go hero RB every time I start a draft. I almost think, though, I'm going to be caught into a hero RB build where I draft somebody pretty early, round 1, round 2, maybe round 3. I was surprised to get a guy like ETN at that spot of the third round. And then that's sort of what I'm going to sit on until I pick it apart later on in drafts. I just don't care about any of these guys in the middle, and it allows me to load up at other positions. I'm taking a Chief here. You could go Worthy. You could go Rice. Let's go Rashee Rice and bet that the NFL is not going to be all too punitive about his offseason troubles. His draft position, his ADP is going to change drastically once we find out. If Rashee Rice isn't suspended at all, which I don't anticipate, he's going to shoot up draft boards and be probably closer to a 5th-round pick, maybe even higher than that. If he does get suspended, we could see him drop down to the 8th or the 9th round. In the 7th, I certainly am happy to take Rashee Rice right now. Now, by the time Home Leagues drafts, I'll probably have more information about what the Rashee situation is, but for now, I feel pretty good about picking him up and the fact that I don't need him in my lineup. I didn't talk a lot about Jaden Reed, but I like the Packers' passing offense. I'd like a piece of it as long as I'm getting it at a fair price, because you could kind of make your decision on, you know, what the valuations should be there. Christian Watson's right now on the board. Romeo Doubs is going to be down here. There's a lot of teams where they've got 3 young, ascending, or just 3 quality wide receivers, and you sort of, as a fantasy player, have to pick which of those you're gonna place your bet on. Looking at possible stacks here, I haven't taken anybody from the Bears, so that wouldn't apply. Jared Goff could be an interesting stack, but I think the 8th round is too early to commit to it, and I still just don't care about those running backs. We're going to take JSN, another flyer on wide receiver. This is the way I tend to draft. I got some comments in the other videos saying my team was terrible. I continue year after year to play the strategy of load up with young, ascending wide receivers. If they don't ascend, that's okay. I've got 2 more of them on the bench that could probably take the spot. And then RB2 is going to be something I make up as I go along. In week 7, I'm usually fist pumping in the air because by that point in the season, I've been able to trade from my receiver depth along with some PPR scat backs and do a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1 to trade into a legitimate RB2. And I've probably been impervious to more of the injuries that tend to befall the running back position as well. Or maybe I haven't, but I don't care because I haven't really paid up for the running backs that I have. The wide receivers are the guys I'm hoping stay healthy and continue to build value as the year goes along. That's sort of the way I view it. There's one running back here that I do finally think is worthwhile. I don't want to be overly invested with starters from the Pittsburgh offense, but I do like Jaylen Warren. I just think he's a better player than Najee Harris. I'm going to take him. Trey Benson is a consideration for me as well. But if I'm getting a guy that I think could be in a 50-50 timeshare in that Pittsburgh offense, and I'm taking him two rounds later than what Najee Harris was taken, I'm okay with the value on that. Benson going like 5 picks later makes me feel like just probably take the guy that you like the most. I like Benson the most because it would be a bet against James Conner, or at least a bet on Benson having a pass-catching role in Arizona right away. The thought process there being that if Benson plays 25% of snaps and is a pass-catching back that gets 4 targets, catches 3 of them for 21 yards, and then has 5 carries for 25 yards, that's 8 PPR points. It's not gonna save your lineup, but it won't kill it either as an RB2 in the early weeks until you kind of find out what you're looking to do. Guy that I'm probably going to be taking in a lot of these mocks is Chase Brown. I'm noticing him there on the ADP board. Do we want to play the ADP game, though? Make a bet that he'll make it back to us and grab Jared Goff here as our quarterback. What I love about the quarterback spot this year is like Lawrence, so capable. Kirk Cousins, capable. Stafford, all these guys, capable as you go down. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm taking Jared Goff because you just can't trust the computer. Oh, and of course they take Chase Brown. Well, now I obviously regret my decision. I was going to say you can't trust the computer not to take a backup quarterback. In a real draft, I would have been a lot more bold and said, if I don't get Goff, so what? There's a lot of other guys down here that I could have taken instead. This is a great example of why we do mock drafts, though. I would be absolutely in shambles right now on missing on Chase Brown because I'm a believer that he'll take over as the top running back for his team. I'm going to basically get the other AFC North version of him by probably drafting Jerome Ford here, but that would be killing me in a real draft. In a mock draft, you learn from it, and you say, hey, remember, like you practice mock drafts and you do these and you watch the videos that I'm putting out here for the chief reason of don't go into your draft without feeling like you're confident and prepared. If you practice it enough times, even if the board doesn't fall your way, you're always going to have an answer for what you want to do. Like Xavier Legette goes, he's another guy I would have been interested in. But this is a learning experience because I'll say, hey, remember that time you mocked and there were 3 quarterbacks who were basically the same, but because you were trying to force a stack with Sam Laporta, you just decided you had to have Jared Goff right then, even though teams 1, 2, and 3 had Stroud, Metcalf, and Josh Allen already, and you weren't probably going to be susceptible to getting sniped there. Instead, you tried to play the ADP game when it didn't need to be played. And that was a lesson that I can learn. And I'm glad for it, because if I hadn't done this, that conviction is maybe not as fresh in my brain when I go into real drafts. That being said, I prefer Chase Brown over Jerome Ford, but kind of a similar situation with Ford. You're looking at Nick Chubb going, if he's just busted and broken, maybe I end up with the RB in Cleveland that you want to have, and I'm getting him in a very late round pick. So you feel good about that. I'm not going to draft a secondary tight end with Jared Goff because of his historic home road splits. Certainly prior to last year, there is maybe reason to think that another quarterback would be worth stashing. But the guys that are here are Rodgers, Stafford, Baker Mayfield, Watson. They're not like the young upside plays. If I would have seen a guy like Jaden Daniels drop later, I would certainly be picking him up here. But this is a couple of rounds later than you're going to see Jaden Daniels eventually go. We'll take a plunge on one more wide receiver. I didn't exactly count to see how many this would make for me. Probably more than I need. But I like Josh Downs. He's in another one of those offenses where you've got a lot of young, talented receivers. Michael Pittman, Josh Downs. They drafted Adonai Mitchell. Who knows really who's going to be the number 2? It's going to be Pittman as the number 1. But the number 2 in Anthony Richardson's offense could be Downs in the slot. It could be Mitchell that really ascends as a rookie. But at this stage of the draft, I like that I'm getting a young player with upside. Like you could go with Quentin Johnson if you believe in him. You could go with Ricky Pearsall. Maybe you bank on an Ayuk trade. You could go with Roman Wilson before he got injured. I think that's probably going to be a rough one for Roman Wilson. He got carted off at practice. But he's expected to return before week 1. He'll be free at the end of drafts, by the way. Granted, just to mention, I've got 2 Steelers already. I would not be drafting Roman Wilson in a real draft given that information. And there's really no quarterbacks down here that I just think are glorious. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draft Sam Darnold, and I'll explain to you why, as Sleeper is glitching. You hate to see that, don't you? Let me see real quick. Yeah, this is no good. Sleeper's going through a bit of a glitch. Let's try to fix it up here. Reload it. Did they give me my guy? No, they didn't. Hopefully that doesn't happen in your real draft. All right, just so everybody knows, I wasn't taking Kendre Miller. I was taking Sam Darnold. The reason being, who did I draft in the first round? Justin Jefferson. So what I would be doing is saying, if Sam Darnold and Jefferson go bananas in week 1, that's a nice stack to have. And if they don't, I drop Darnold for whoever the hot waiver claim is in week 1 at a RB or wide receiver position. But let's kind of take a quick look before we get out of here at the way the draft rounded out for my team. I think I like it. I'm never going to, and look, you're going to be used to saying, well, this guy, he didn't even draft Kendre Miller, so he's really only got 3 running backs. Jerome Ford might not play that much. Jaylen Warren might not play that once. ETN, ETN's an okay running back, but is this guy serious? Yeah, I'm serious. This is how I draft my teams every year. Seems to go okay for me in home leagues. As you play in different formats with different, some leagues you might say, oh, Brenden, my league doesn't trade. Well, maybe this wouldn't be the strategy for you because I bank on having the ability to say, hey, my wide receivers, Jefferson, Flowers, Pickens, Jaden Reed. I don't know if he'll be the number 1 for Green Bay, but again, like I had said when I drafted him, it was a good spot in the draft to take him. Maybe those guys are my starters, and I feel pretty good about them all. Even if they're not superstars, they're getting me 10 to 12 to 15. Maybe they'll have spike weeks to 20 PPR points, and I'm hanging in there with those players. And then you think about guys off the bench like Smith and Jigba. Maybe he takes a new step under the new coaching staff in Seattle. Josh Downs, we already talked about. Rashee Rice is the one for the Patrick Mahomes-led Kansas City Chiefs if he plays and he's not suspended. But I don't care about that for the week 1 through 4 or 1 through 6 because I'm going to use all these other guys in my lineup. So by the time I get to week 6, week 7, week 8, and you're talking about the prime time of trade season, I've been trying to figure it out between Jaylen Warren and starting Jerome Ford as my RB2 for a while, and they get me 6 points one week, and I'm sad. But then the next week they score a touchdown randomly, and it's 10. Like, don't overvalue the RB2 spot when you are in a PPR setting and you can afford to be really elite at all these other positions. Sam Laporta is great. I'm stacking him with Goff. Could that be a little bit questionable? Sure. But like I had said, I had intended to draft Sam Darnold at the bottom before Sleeper had a glitch, and maybe he's a guy that sticks around all year. Maybe he gets dumped right away and J.J. McCarthy comes in to start. Who cares? I'm going to pick up another running back off the wire, and maybe that guy's my RB2 because he's getting 50% snap share, and it's somebody that we've never heard of because there are injuries. When injuries happen to running backs, what happens? Your league always scrambles to the wire to pick up the new RB1 or the new RB2 for that NFL team, but the guy that had that guy on his team and drafted him in the first or second round, A, doesn't get the waiver priority to get the backup unless he stashed him on his bench, and B, you also don't have the ability to know for sure that your roster is strong enough in other areas to weather a storm like that. Whereas I just don't draft running backs because they're going to get hurt, and when they do, I'm going to take advantage and spend all my waiver stuff on, if it's a fab league or my waiver priority, on the running back that I can then plug into RB2 if Jaylen Warren sucks and Jerome Ford doesn't play. So that's my strategy every single year. I'm looking to upgrade RB2 eventually. I just don't think it has to come in the draft. Let me know your opinion on this strategy, and if you think it's one that could work, how do you like this roster? And let me know who you're targeting in fantasy drafts this season. I feel like this is a pretty nice roster, good balance. Drafted some players that I've honestly not picked a lot in mocks, and that's something good to do too, because you might be surprised once you're sitting there looking at the bubbles here and seeing where they slot into your team that maybe actually like those players more than you thought you did. That's going to do it for this edition of Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football Mock Drafts. We'll talk to you next time on the channel. Peace.